Pardon me while I have a strange interlude.
There is nothing else. Life is an obscure hobo bumming a ride on the omnibus of art.
Along the misty corridors of time, and in those corridors I see figures, strange figures.
Welcome back, my friends, to the AP Strange Show. I'm your host, AP Strange. This is my show, and tonight's show is brought to you by Centrism Rose-Tinted Goggles. Perfect for walking through a utopia. Just put on the rose-tinted goggles, and everything seems okay, and both sides are pretty much the same. So don't worry about everything going on around you with Centrism Rose-Tinted Goggles. And tonight on the show, I have a returning guest. It's very exciting because I very much enjoyed talking to him the last time. And for those who heard that episode, you really only heard half of what we talked about. There was like a full 45 minutes before, and I think like an hour after that we were just chatting that you didn't get. He's a Mesoamerican spiritual practitioner and teacher, and he is about to offer a new course on his Substack on Mesoamerican astrology. So we're going to talk about that tonight. Welcome to the show, Solomon Pakal.
Hey there. It's so great to be back. I had a blast last time we were here. You're an awesome host, and you're really knowledgeable and stuff. That's why we were cheesing it for like an extra hour after the show, because we could keep talking about this kind of stuff and relate the parallels across cultures. So it's great to be back. I love shows like this. You run a good show, so back for more.
Oh, I appreciate it, man. Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm happy to have you back, and I was glad that you reached out to me too, because your new course on your Substack, which people go subscribe to it right now. Pause the show because he already has the Substack going. If you're not already subscribed, go do that now. But you had mentioned this Mesoamerican astrology subscription tier for your Substack. And I have to admit, as far as being knowledgeable about magical things, astrology is one of my weaker points. But mostly what I am familiar with is Western astrology, and that's not really what you're talking about here, right?
No, not at all.
Yeah.
Mesoamerican astrology, particularly that of Mayan astrology, because Mesoamerican civilizations, there was many of them, and they all had different systems. The Aztec and the Maya one are pretty similar. They're all pretty similar, but there's some that we have more information on than others. Like the Zapotec one, we don't have like any actionable information on it as of right now. But in Mayan astrology too, there's various different kinds of at least approaches, I would say. But the overall approach of Mayan astrology that makes it different than Western astrology is that it is more, instead of astrology, it should probably be called geoastrology. Mythoastrology, I think, is another appropriate term, or telluric astrology. If you want to go the traditional route, they would probably call it the count of days, or those who count the suns is what the day keepers are called, the Ahi. That still exists today. Those are the main proponents of Mayan astrology practitioners and actual, essentially, priests of that tradition, but they're called Ahi or Akin in the Yucatec traditions, and it means day keepers, or those who keep the days, those who count the days, those who count the faces of the sun. I want to get into the mechanics here about it, but I do want to just preface where I approach it from, because my mother's of Kachikelmaya descent, but her lineage essentially is not that of day keepers. The day keepers are a pretty well preserved tradition over the course of the colonial era. And the calendar dates way back. The calendar dates back 4,000 years at least. This calendar has been in use since for a very long time before the birth of Christ and whatnot. Um, it is very archaic, but we see traces of it everywhere. Like I'm
Hmm.
sorry, not just Mesoamerica, but even here where I'm located in Ohio, you see a lot of the who were the Adena people use a lot of the mechanics that were present in Mesoamerican astrology. Maybe not so much all of the fine operational details, but the overall premise is very clearly there in the archaeological record. I can get into that later of like where that parallel comes from. But I do want to preface this like my family's background comes from that of what is typically labeled brujeria, but brujeria is not a pre-Columbian term. This is a term that's been it was originally placed on us by Catholicism, and then I guess in more contemporary circles has been used as like a form of empowerment. But it is essentially the general term in Latin America used for witchcraft. And brujeria,
Hmm.
where my family comes from, the Antigua and Ciudad Guatemala area, is going to look very different than what North Mexican brujeria looks like, and that's going to look very different than Colombian brujeria.
Right.
So it's not like even there's similarities, but there's no like real lineage continuity between brujeria. It's usually families that head it. However, coming from that geographic region, there's a overall kind of knowledge about the calendar, and then there are people who essentially do their best with the calendar, or some people deprioritize the calendar for other modes of magic. Um, but they're essentially the brujeria mindset of taking the calendar or taking a form of magic and then expanding upon it in ways that work is kind of like the mentality that I come from. However, I always strive as a historian as well to keep things as culturally authentic as possible. I do not want to stretch the meanings of these things to fit some kind of mold, just
Hmm.
to make people a bit more comfortable with it, to make it more sellable or anything.
Right.
Um, if I find parallels between mythologies and between cultures, I will say it. But if I will also preface when it's a stretch. So,
Right. Right.
as so I do approach I am not an initiated daykeeper. I have had mentors that are, um, but they're like my tradition of Mesoamerican astrology is as legitimate as theirs. It's just they do have an official daykeeper body that they have 8,000 daykeepers. So this is a very well preserved and pretty well documented tradition. And Westerners too can get initiated as daykeepers as well. Just requires like a 9 month pilgrimage to Guatemala, and it's a
Mm.
big commitment. Um, it's not always feasible. Uh, we'll get into the parts where I definitely do um, make additions and components additions I think are tasteful that aren't addressed in the traditional system, and I'll explain why those additions are there. But what is the main difference? We know astrology as like the study of how the movements and positions of celestial bodies, the sun, the moon, planets, and stars, are believed to influence life on Earth, right? That's the heart of astrology. It views the cosmos as a living system where we human beings, nature, and the numinous are all interconnected.
Right.
As above, so below kind of deal. So celestial in base. Whereas Mayan astrology, Mayan geoastrology, if you will, is the study and practice of sacred timing based off of celestial and human centric correspondences. This has to do with things such as animal archetypes, sacred objects, events, and human gestation itself.
Hmm.
These are the things that are believed to influence life on Earth. Thus, Mayan astrology or geoastrology uses mythological snapshots in time, as I like to say, to align to human life with cosmic rhythms. And I I know there's got to be some practitioners out there in the audience that will hear this and be like, "Oh, well, yeah, that's what like Western astrology does too." I think once you've spent enough time in either system, you really it is a bit more effortless to connect those parts, but they are fundamentally different upon initial approach. And I think that really does need to be said. Because now you can do different things with each system. It's like if you can't
Right.
perform something, I'm talking from a practical magic standpoint here. If you can't perform something because the Western astronomical alignment, astrological alignment is off, you can basically switch calendars now, because these aren't based on star systems. They're based upon mythos of this continent,
Hmm.
that has been going on repeat. Essentially, it doesn't have to do with the alignment of the stars. There is one day sign that has a lot of cross pollination with the planet Venus, but it is not Venus proper. There was a Venus proper in Mesoamerica, and depending on the time period, they had different names for it. But the way that this day sign has survived to today, it doesn't have to do with Venus proper. It's more kind of like the expression.
Hmm.
So, again, how they differ. Western, and I'll throw Vedic in here, just for example, equals celestial. Just giving the simple kind of rundown. Mayan equals terrestrial based astrology. So both interpret cycles and alignments as symbolic patterns that can reveal insights into personality, destiny, timing, and collective shifts. Both provide guides to meaning via cosmic rhythms or for self understanding, decision making, spiritual growth, you know, wealth, love, like where am I going in life? It has a lot of the same carryovers that regular astrology does, right? Like, but we should say it.
Yeah.
So, so technically, it's not astrology. That's kind of like the funny, ironic thing about it. But because it serves a lot of this, it can do a lot of the same things. It has that moniker of being Mayan astrology. I don't mind bringing up the word Mayan astrology and kind of like having a discussion from there, because a lot of bad takes on Mesoamerican magic and Mesoamerican history, even a lot of the pseudoscience and colonial era propaganda that was used to dehumanize indigenous people, a lot of it in the modern day can be dispelled rather quickly with education. But a lot of this is an area of the world whose history was deprioritized in a Eurocentric environment.
Hmm.
So that's why there's a lot more BS that covers all of the, covers the good stuff. So, um, yeah, like we can start the Mayan astrology discussion, and then I will tell anybody I'm talking to that it's technically not that, but it's a healthy starting point, and I do that with a lot of things. Uh, there's so much of Mesoamerican magic that is glossed over with bad takes, whether it be like these cacao ceremonies or the word Mayan versus Maya, uh, Hunabku as this pre-Columbian monotheism. Um, Even right now, it's Hispanic Heritage Month, right? Or
Yeah.
Latino Heritage Month, and you have different takes on this, so I'm not speaking for everyone here, but like, when people are saying Latino Heritage Month, there are a contingent of indigenous people that they don't like that term at all. They don't like being associated with Latin Heritage Month because it just recolonizes the people through verbiage. Um,
Right.
and I completely understand that take. I think it's a valid take, and I don't have the answer of what is the right thing to do with that just yet, because you have people on both sides and like various camps that they're indigenous, they like it, and they're not like colonized in mindset. It's just it's kind of the truth. Our homelands, they are now within the modern borders of what is called Latin America. There was no Guatemala before 1492. There was no Mexico before 1492. There was no there was no
Yeah.
border before 1492 on the Rio Grande. But at the same time, there would have been something, like it would have belonged to the Aztec Empire, or it would have belonged to the city state of Tikal, you know. So uh, like even for the sake of discussion, I'm not even Latino, really. I'm technically not Latino, but I do a lot of cross pollinating with Latino creators and people that want to like have representation. Um, because I just believe that's a good starting point to have a better discussion. You're not gonna if I was just got angry, right?
Yeah.
At
Right.
like somebody calling me Latino, it's like, well, that's not a productive discussion. They leave discussion very disgruntled and uneducated, and now they have a bad opinion. So it's like, I'm not even technically Latino because my dad is Anglo-Saxon. My mother's purely indigenous, but like I'm mixed, but I'm not Latino. But it's like my
Hmm.
family, we come from the borders within Latin America, so it gets hairy. Um, so a little bit of kind of cultural awareness for the audience, because it's not as simple as the right or the left want to say it, coming from somebody who's from the culture. Um,
Right.
but in short, Western astrology reads your map of the sky at your birth, and Mayan reads your personal mythology relevant to the mythology of this continent, which is just as valid as any mythology across the world. A lot of Western mythology is based off of what? Greek mythology. I'm
Yeah.
sorry, a lot of Western astrology is based off of Greek mythology. A lot of Vedic astrology is based off of a lot of Hindu mythology, or what would be known as Hindu mythology. So if uh, there's a lot of trepidation I see about Westerners or people that are not of indigenous descent getting involved with Mayan magic. Well, you probably don't have much relevance to ancient Greece or even contemporary Greece, which they are not blonde hair, blue eyed, and like more related to Midwestern American populations. They're probably a bit more like they're Cyrillic. They're a bit more closer to the Middle East in terms of the
Right.
demographic.
Yeah.
Um, that Mediterranean demographic is very diverse. But yet we have a knee-jerk reaction in the United States to immediately associate ancient Greece with like ancient America, like the American identity, like an American
Hmm.
continuity, and that's not necessarily correct. And there's plenty of Westerners that get involved with Vedic astrology and get involved with various kinds of like Southeast Asian magic. They don't have a problem with it, but for some reason with indigenous magic, they have a problem with it. I get it because the colonization of the Americas, but atrocities have happened to all these cultures. So I'm just saying, it's like if you live on the American continent, and if you have the desire, which I would encourage everybody to have the desire, this mythology, this astrology, it's relevant to you, like because you're on the land of this mythology. It's more
Yeah.
relevant here. So yeah, welcome, essentially.
Yeah, I like that, especially, it's almost kind of like spirit of place, like the land itself, the continent itself has its own um well, indigenous spirit life, I guess, on the other side of, I don't know if that's a good way to put it.
No, no,
Just
it is. So the thing is that so this is an example of time magic. I think last time we
right.
talked about the different kinds of Mayan magic.
Yeah.
It's primarily
Which,
time magic
mhm.
astrology, right? But it's also geospatial because there's like directional correspondences to these things. But that literally has to do with physical space, like your location. And what I do find is that especially in this modern kind of fight, right? You had we were just mentioning Michael M. Hughes that I've cited in a presentation before. Very impressed with some of his work. Uh, if we're in this kind of collective struggle, right? I do feel that most modern magicians have been operating with one arm tied behind their back because uh, America is a melting pot, and there's a big, large, viable, and beautiful history of European traditions being here that deserve their place here because history has smacked us together. But indigenous magic is like an entire a whole nother arsenal that has not been used in this struggle
Mhm.
fighting for this land that is, indigenous first. Uh, why that has to do, it's not just relevance, but native peoples had certain corresponding associations for things like the directions that differ from most European traditions. And, you could just say that's through that cultural lens, but you could also argue that maybe this side of the world operated on those kinds of correspondences rather
Mhm.
than the others. Now, I know you and I, we've even talked about pataphysics and just like how flexible reality can get, right? So
Right.
I do think Wiccan correspondences can work here on
Okay.
American land. I do think that. But I think you are going to get a higher efficacy from what has like been used here for quadruple the amount of time.
Mhm.
Like foreign magic here has essentially been used at a maximum of 500 years. But really, a lot of these things are much younger than that.
Hmm.
Meanwhile, things like this calendar have been in usage for over 4,000 yeyears,
Yeah.
documented over 4,000 years of usage. So,
Well, you've mentioned before that the mathematics and the sciences of the Maya were more advanced than the Catholic um, colonizers that came over. And I wonder if
yeah, and
this.
actually,
Uh, uh,
um,
uh, well, what I'm getting at is I kind of envision, if I'm getting it right, I think of it visually. I'm visualizing intersecting planes with what you're describing, where you're
mm,
talking about the spatial and the physical intersecting with the planetary and the individual, as well as a particular thing happening in that moment that acts as like an omen or a stamp or a snapshot for that moment. Am I getting
yeah,
this right at all?
yes, no, no, that's
Uh,
exactly it.
so it's
And
just a very, very much more complex way of synthesizing all of the different elements that are around. That probably it's almost no wonder that the United States of America, is such a weird place because
mhm.
when you bring a Western perspective or European perspective over into that, you could see how it would get a bit wobbly, you know?
Oh yeah, it's a complete like it's just different. It's trying to get Windows to work on Apple devices and vice versa, kind of.
Yeah, yeah,
It's just like the hardware and the software like are just not native to each other, and then you're trying to force the other to work on this device. And I mean, you can make it work, but there's just going to be some kind of like membrane barriers that you're not going to be able to. You can burst through them, but then it doesn't really work optimally.
right.
So for instance, a common example I like to bring up is I don't know all the Wiccan correspondences of the directions, but I do recall that south is fire, and it has to do with the color green. Uh, in Mesoamerica, south belongs to the color yellow, and the element is water. So very different there. That's just one example. Uh, so it's like when you have these two kind of systems like presence in the same room, which I've been a part of that. It's like, well, how do you reconcile that? And I think it's like kind of like that. Like you can get Windows programs and Google programs to work on Apple, but it's not optimal. And you can do
Mhm.
that vice versa. That's why I say I think modern magicians that have been in this like collective struggle, they've been missing us a part of the arsenal to optimize essentially. And I'm not
Mhm.
saying this or that. I'm saying this and that. It's just it has to be kind of streamlined the main way. Or I'm sorry, streamlined in a good way. So I'm trying to provide that arm of indigenous magic to the greater magical know-how of the communities and whatnot, of our magical communities. So
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I could see that, and I think it almost maybe to extend the metaphor, it enhances the user experience.
yes, no, no, yes, yeah, no. I completely agree with enhancing the user experience, especially in a globalized society. Like, look, it ain't 1491 anymore. I know some of my indigenous compatriots like would be like, well, what if they just didn't come over? It's like, guys, it's over. Like it's been over. Like we live in a globalized society. Yeah, we are more familiar with a globalized society than an isolated society at this point. Um, It pays off to have a worldly knowledge of things. The most
Mhm.
educational thing I ever got was, my father started taking me to museums when I was, like, in diapers every weekend. Lived at in DC, so the Smithsonian was one-stop shop every weekend. I learned more there than I ever did in school, and my dad, he was a military man and an adventurer, and he took me traveling since I was a very young age, and it's really something you can't get in school, and it's not something you can get online. What you can get is a taste of it online because now we're interconnected, but there that, coming togetherness of various knowledge types from different cultures is beyond a gold mine. And if we just pretend like all of these traditions work in isolation in 2025, I think that is not the most aware thing to say. Now, that being said, I am not for the general kind of take on eclecticism because, besides the idea of cultural appropriation and it being disrespectful to different cultures, yeah, that's the truth, but it's even more just not good magic because now you are like plugging this and that, like we were just talking about, like the user experience, right? And trying to get force software and hardware to work that's not native to each other. What are you going to get? You're going to get a pretty bad product. And I don't pull that out of thin air. I've been a part of pagan and occult communities for a long time, and I've heard various stories, especially when there's a lot of Westerners that get involved with ATR stuff and they try to like push it like ATR principles. I'm sorry, Western principles onto ATR stuff, and
Hmm.
just kind of make it a happy-go-lucky party. And they don't know that certain like Orishas, they don't get along or something like that, and bad things happen. And just this bad operational. It's not operationally efficient at the end of the day. I think too much of an eclectic thing is not an operational thing at a certain point. Um, so I'm a big advocate. I have my own order here, like with practitioners of different backgrounds, and we all do different rituals. But when we do a Solomonic ritual, we are doing Solomonic magic. When we do a Mayan ritual, we are doing Mayan magic. There's a little bit of room for interpretation because, again, we're in a globalized society. Um, but for the large portion or the in large part of the ritual, we are sticking to what we know from the host culture that what works. You know,
Hmm.
we're not doing this in a ancient city plaza where there's dozens of pyramids surrounding us. We're doing it in an isolated location that has air conditioning. So that's
Yeah.
one way to accommodate for it. But yes, I think in today's world, especially with the rising of fundamentalist religion, um, we need to arm ourselves with various kinds of representation and magic. I'm just trying to advocate for my culture's representation, and I hope we get representation from all kinds of cultures.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I think we need it. Now more than ever, I really think it's necessary. So that makes what you have to offer all the more valuable. And I hope my listeners will take advantage if they have their own practice, or even if not, because this has a lot to do with timing, and timing is super important with world events. So
Yeah, yeah,
um,
and it's just like I saw Evo Dominguez post something today about the Western astrology forecast for 2026, and it's very turbulent. Uh, the thing is that so like there are Mayan predictions too on like a bigger kind of like 2025, 2026 level. Um, yeah, I don't know, it's a lot, but I'll just let me continue talking about the calendar really quick, and I'll see if I can
yeah,
get
yeah,
back
yeah.
to,
Well, let's
to
stay on
that.
track.
Um, so the calendar, it essentially works through at its base level has day sign what are called day signs, which are essentially 20 zodiac symbols, if you will, quote unquote zodiac. They're not really the same thing because they're not star constellations. Um, the Maya did have star constellations too, fun fact, but they did articulate them different. And that's why you can't just swap Western astrology. You can't just plug it in. Um, that's why it's like I consider in my model planetary considerations like retrogrades and stuff like that because the Maya did have codices for those planets, but their constellation system was very different. So they had like a bat constellation. They had like Orion was articulated completely differently. It was instead of where Orion's belt was, they call it three hearthstones, and every Maya household in the country, in the middle of their houses, they would have like a hearthstone stove, like a where you would cook and stuff. And it was to resemble that starry passageway, that Orion's belt. But the way that they articulated it as a figure was a man with a turtle shell, like an old man wearing a turtle shell, kind of like a
Right.
kind of like a Koopa Troopa. Scorpio was largely considered similar. Like Scorpio was a woman with a scorpion's tail. And there's other constellations as well, but they're just very different from Western astrology to where you just can't swap and plug and play. But I do consider planetary retrogrades, as I said, because they had codices that tracked the synodic cycles of them. They knew that Mars had a 780-day cycle. They knew that Venus had 584. They had one for every planet in the solar system. The more mysterious one is Mercury, but that's kind of inside baseball. I have a friend who's actually uncovering a lot of Mercury stuff in the archaeology. But it comes down to 20 day signs. Think of these as your sun signs, essentially, and then 13 numbers. These are lunar in nature. So essentially, the day signs to get a Solkeen, which is the solar. I'm sorry, not the. It is the sacred calendar. The Solkeen is the sacred calendar, as opposed to the civil calendar. Is what you would use for like agriculture and whatnot. The Maya had a sacred calendar of 260 days. So that's not a year. I want to specify their civil calendar, like how we operate on the Gregorian, is a civil calendar, 365 days, because it's based upon the passage of the sun. This is not necessarily, it has solar correspondences in a mystic sense, but it's not like the actual like astronomical passage of the sun. It's has to do with the human's relationship to the sun. That's what the sacred calendar is. The Hob is the civil calendar, and it is 365 days, but I think a more appropriate way to say it is 360 plus 5 days. It's, again, there's some inside baseball there of like why that is, but that's how they tracked the cycles of the sun. That's how they tracked it so accurately. To this day, there is a debate who is more accurate as far as daily timing goes. Is it the ancient Maya or is it the atomic clock? And it's really a toss-up. Like if you can go look it up. Like scientists are still like, it could be either or. It's like it's that precise. So they were very, very good at tracking celestial and terrestrial events. But this is a human-based calendar. So it has a much more intimate connection to the human being because it has to do with roughly the period of human gestation. That's what 260 days equals. And it's these 20 day signs that are on repeat. Again, day signs are not like pagan gods, though, like kind of like the 7 days of the week that are based upon, Mars, Venus, and such. They're not pagan gods. And if I'm speaking from a magician's standpoint, talking to a day sign is very weird. It's not like talking to a highly personified mythological spirit as like a Persephone or something like that. It's not like that. It's very, very strange. It's strange, but it's immediate. And it's I don't want to say it like you'll find day signs that have a bit more like kind of negative energy, I guess you could say, and some that are more positive energy. They really are great examples of dual nature, and it's just nature. You don't get a sense of malice, really. You do have a sense of clarity, and that clarity may not be the prettiest all the time, but like it's the clarity nonetheless. So I like to say that these are snapshots of mythological time on repeat ad infinitum. And so what does that mean? Each one of these day signs corresponds to a mythological happening in Mesoamerican lore. So, for example, the very first day sign, Imosh, and the Aztecs would call it Cipacli, has to do with the chaotic crocodile before creation that the gods have to slay in order to make the earth. This is the equivalent of the chaos conf that you find in other places around the world. This idea of a giant, terrible lizard creature, whether it's a dragon or a giant crocodile, the chaos conf of like the mythological heroes slaying this dragon before to create the universe. That's what that sign actually harkens back to. so the implications of that one are great, right? Like they're huge, because it's like, here we have a chaos come from this side of the world that has history tracing back way before Christ. So a similarity to the ancient Canaanites, a similarity to the ancient Mesopotamians. I am not saying that it was ETs or anything. I'm just saying that it is such a universal mystic condition that basically every human society had to consider it, and held it in high regard. Another example of this mythological timing, uh, pretty cool and exclusive to Mesoamerica, is that of the day of Akbal. And Akbal has to do with the first dawn and the first dusk. Well, no, this one has to, the original mythological tale, I'm sorry, is dawn. And today's, it can mean dusk or dawn. But in the traditional sense, it means dawn, because essentially the first primordial humans had to do ritual in order to get the sun to rise. So to make the first dawn happen, they essentially conjures the energy of this day sign through ritual to chant the sun's rise to light the earth for the first time. So very unique stories that are to this continent, but all very relevant to this continent. And I'll just interject like the relevancy here again. Um, what birthed civilization on this continent was the advent of corn as a crop, and that happened in Mesoamerica. The Maya and the Olmec were the first to really do it. But from here, it spread to both south of the equator and further north. And the mathematical and language systems came from Mesoamerica. So the thing is that like I'm in Ohio, the Adena people had a very similar cosmology to that of Mesoamerica, where they had three realms. They even had earth mound pyramids that within the earth mounds would have an upper world, a middle world, and an underworld, and like a gigantic frat house mound party, essentially, when they did shamanic rituals. And they had a 20 count system. So like 1 through 10, like how we count uh, numbers in the modern day, is a base 10 system that comes from Arabic, like Arab nations and Arab mathematics. The Maya use, and all of Mesoamerica and pieces of northern Native America used base 20. This is more than likely because we have 10 fingers and 10 toes. So they use those for counting. But that's how far reaching, and obviously corn as a crop is as far reaching as the Iroquois country up in the Great White North. So all of this is very relevant to both continents
Yeah.
here on this side of the world. If you want to say that, like how influential Greek correspondences were, even in Central Europe, because they would become influential, then you have to make a similar argument for here. In fact, the footprint is bigger here. North and South America combined is bigger than all of Europe. So
Right. Yeah.
it is very relevant. Again, a lot of people call into question the relevance of like, oh, well, how is this relevant to me? Like, my ancestors are Irish, but it's like your family's been here for like 300 years, bro. Like, it's
Right.
like your spiritual imprint has to do with this continent. It's like you have more in common with people who run taco trucks than you do like the ancient Irish. So it's very relevant. I'm not trying to diminish that, but it's like, if you're calling into question the relevance, I am like pointing out the relevance. So
Well, yeah. I mean, the way I look at it personally, I don't know. This is an old-fashioned joke that old people would say when I was a kid, but I've always considered myself a Heinz 57. The 57 ingredients that go into
no, but
ketchup.
in Heinz ketchup.
That was the old man joke when I was a kid. But I mean, I'm an American mutt. Basically, I have a whole bunch of nationalities and different heritage lines that I could trace. But
Yeah.
I've I identify with some. Like I'm very close to. I feel a close lineage with my grandmother who was Italian, so I tend to think of that. I've taken a lot from her that's made up who I am. Um, but I'm an American, like
Mm.
this is my home, this
Oh
is,
yeah.
I grew up in Massachusetts. My family's been here for generations, and New England especially is just in my bones, and so I have thought over the years of trying to trace my heritage back to places that I came from, but ultimately, um, the granite underneath my feet here in New England is the anchor for me,
Yeah.
and the
Yeah.
ocean, the Atlantic
Yeah.
Ocean
No.
off the coast, Yeah,
Yeah, no, I'm very, if I may interject, because I was a 10-year veteran of the U.S. Army. I am proud to be an American. That's like why my mother's family moved here because they narrowly escaped the genocide that was happening in Guatemala, and my
yeah,
mom wanted me to be born in the nation's capital, and I'm very proud about that. And I'm not the biggest fan of the U.S. Army, but I am proud of my service, and I'm proud of being an American because here it ain't flawless. It's a very checkered history, but we have more potential than any other country in the world to change things. Like within our borders, without outside of our borders, we have the potential to change things with this nation. And this nation has not treated indigenous people the best. It hasn't treated African Americans the best. But I served with some of the best soldiers I ever served with were Puerto Rican. They were African American. They came from all kinds of walks of life. All of these people have contributed to a great American nation. They've made our nation's businesses better.
hmm
So I'm very proud of that. And we need to utilize America to change America for the better. You know. So and to parry off of
yeah.
that, so what you're saying to me after all that Massachusetts talk is that you're a Patriots fan.
Well, no, I'm not a sports guy, so
Oh, okay, okay. I was about to say because I was
I, I'm a
I
Sox
just
fan. Baseball is
okay.
the only that's the only sport I understand at all. But I still don't. I don't go out of my way to watch the game or anything.
Okay, okay, yeah, yeah, baseball can be fun. MMA is my chosen sport, so
Yeah,
that's the only one I really follow. A little bit of boxing because they
yeah.
just had that big one last week with Canelo Crawford. But
But yeah, I mean, the state that I'm in is the birthplace of basketball and volleyball. But I don't really care about either of those.
I think Massachusetts is also the home of the hamburger, like the original hamburger.
I think that gets debated often. It's a candidate for sure. I think some
Okay,
people make that claim, but I don't know for sure. I think New York tries to take that as well.
New York tries to take everything.
Well, it makes sense. I mean, there were a lot of, or maybe even Pennsylvania. There were a lot of German people in Pennsylvania that we would get because that's where the name comes from, is Hamburg, Germany.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But we're,
It's
we're
driven
way
with
off topic
wonder.
now. But that's actually a great example. It's just like the hamburger or like the Big Mac. Like
Yeah, yeah, I mean, well,
is
it's American history, and that's like well, that's a great
yeah,
example, though, is because, like, how relevant is that to the continent? It became relevant because
right.
history, man, like, history smacked us together, so, like, all of this is to say that, these day signs are relevant to people that are living on this continent that do have a spiritual imprint. Like, if you can go to a sacred site, right? I've been to sacred sites in India, been to sacred sites in Africa, and they have left an impression on me that changed me as a person. Um,
hmm
the thing is that can happen even in less concentrated dosages based upon where you dwell. If that wasn't the case, there wouldn't be spirits of place. Like
right.
a lot of cryptids that we talk about are spirits of place, and then sometimes like geospatial phenomena, but it still has to do with location. So location and your time spent in location, very, very relevant to spiritual happenings. But moving on to the numbers, the numbers are essentially 13 numbers that have to do with lunations of between matching the moon's passage and the sun's passage and matching them together. It's kind of complex, but bear with me on it. They're called
Okay.
Trisanas, and why they're important, um, is because Mesoamerican lunar influences were believed to affect individual and communal behavior. So think about like full moon lunacy. You hear about people like just massive like lunacy, or like just strange things happen. People behave weird on a full moon, right? Think about it like that, but more constantly, because full moon's at the moon's maximum, but there are incremental amounts of the moon getting there until it hits maximum. So, but every single increment has a certain essentially ramping effect, like an energy to it. So the Maya had a system of like how this would work. But it works in combination with the day signs. So there's cycle 13 numbers alternating alongside these 13 day signs. So today is the day of 8 Etsnob, but it was 4 Etsnob not too long ago. And it doesn't happen in sequential order. So this cycle of 20 days is 8 Etsnob. It does not mean the last cycle of days was 7 Etsnob, because they're odd numbers and they work in advanced combinations. But tomorrow will be 9 Kabok. But there is a 4 Kawok. There is 1 through 13 of Kawok. There's 1 through 13 of Etsnob. And all of these different combinations happen at different times. So think of them as like 2 adjacent weeks going on at the same time. One week has numbers and the other week has names. So if your day sign corresponds to your personality, this is like your prime, like your sun sign, I guess, but it's your main zodiac sign. If your day signs correspond to your personality and destiny described in mythological meaning, and if your trisenas, the numbers, correspond to receptive and instinctual qualities because they're lunar in nature, 13 numbers times 20 names equals 260 days. That's where you get the 260-day calendar. And human gestation is 260 days. So in a poetic sense, numbers, i.e. moon, times day sign, i.e. sun, equals the sacred calendar, i.e. human, i.e. earth. So moon times sun equals human/earth. That's the basis of the Mayan calendar. So very esoterically relevant, if that is the equation.
Yeah, and I mean, with that kind of resonance there, each and all of us together and each of us individually are always in a process of becoming. So the gestation thing is a nice a nice resonance to have there in an esoteric sense, especially if you can utilize the system to for the choices that you make in your life and who you eventually become, you know.
Yeah, and there's advanced layers to that too, like doing a whole there's actually like 2 different astrological readings that I do for clients that I'm only offering one right now, but because the other one's kind of even more complex. But essentially, your day sign that process of becoming is actually reflected in cycles of 13 years. Every 13 years, essentially, your prime day sign kind of shifts. Which I found there are some unique points of convergence with Western astrology in that way. Like, so if you turn 26, you're coming at the time of like another day sign transition. That's relatively around what a person's Saturn return is. Like I had a very early Saturn return at 27, and but some people it's like 29. So, you could consider that like, oh well, there's going to be upheaval, right? Like, but in Mesoamerica, it was seen as like it's your day sign transition. So, but anytime transitions involved, right, it could be kind of rocky. So if you add 13 years on top of that, you end up at 39 years old. That's pretty close to what is in Western astrology called the Uranus opposition or the midlife crisis. So, auspicious timing. Now, I will say that that shift in Mesoamerica at 39 years old is not regarded as, they just had a different outlook on it. They didn't really see it as like you're going to make a bunch of regrets, or you're going to just like you're going to start buying luxury cars and chains or whatever Mark Zuckerberg is doing these days to rebrand himself. Midlife crisis, it wouldn't have that same kind of like bad press, I guess, in Mesoamerica. But so I do astrological reports based upon this system of astrology. And the astrological reports that I typically go off of, the ones that are a bit more relevant to everybody in the massive population, are they come from understanding the day signs, knowing how to do the basics, and then when the Trisana switches. So every different Trisana, whatever day sign rules it, that's the energy that's going to carry on that next 2 weeks, roughly, next 13 days. And then it'll switch again after those 13 days. And then a different prevailing energy of the moon, essentially, not it's lunar influence, but I don't want to necessarily call it the energy of the moon. It's much more nuanced than that. But a different energy will essentially be pressed upon society
Okay.
and human behavior. So every 13 days, there's a different kind of theme. And what this means for your birth chart essentially is that whatever Trisana you were born under, essentially everybody being born in that 13-day time period was influenced by the same energy. So you were influenced by societal events that were happening around the world, but also I found this with clients I did astrology for. They're even their neighborhoods, like where were you born, what was happening in that city. And there was somebody who was born during the Rodney King uh, protests and riots.
Yeah.
And it very much reflected in their chart and then life events later on. So,
Huh.
so
And they
yeah,
were in LA?
yes, yeah, they were born in
Okay.
LA. And
Wow.
so,
Huh.
so yeah,
Interesting.
so even societal, yeah, again, geospatial and temporal magic here having relevance to the time of birth. But that Trisana energy doesn't just affect children being born, it affects society as a whole. So the way that they saw it was a pyramid. So if anybody like just pictures in their mind, like the Chichen Itza pyramid is pretty famous, right? There's this kind of like you start at the bottom, like say you start on one side of the pyramid, go up to the tippy top, and then you come down. That's the way that the Maya saw these trecenas, as they're called, the 13 numbers. That the bottom left of the pyramid is essentially number one, step is number two, step number three, step number four, and so on. At the top would be the number 7, and then it would go all the way down to 13. And you see this on some of the architecture and many of the pyramids, where it's like 13 steps. Oh, I'm sorry, it would equal up to that same amount. So it'd be 7 layers. But it's like if you count the steps that way, it would be 13. That's not with every pyramid, but there's many that do this. So a rundown of like basically what those numbers mean. So this is Mayan numerology is basically what I'm trying to say. You could extend the numerology even up to the number 20, but that's going to be a little different kinds of numerology. There's even numerology that gets into high numbers, like per the codices. That one's really mysterious. But this is Maya numerology at its most well known, and it's really not that well known. I had to uh, study under some daykeepers to really get a grip on it. But they like to say that the lower numbers are actually weaker, and then the higher numbers out of the 13 are like extreme, and they have preferred numbers somewhere in the middle. For my astrological reports, I don't like the word weak because that kind of doesn't make any sense. Like if we're living in the Trisana and yeah, it's number 1, but it's influencing the next 2 weeks. It's pretty powerful. Like even the
Yeah.
other day signs are influenced by that first Trisana period and that first number. So that's not a really good usage of the word, I think. But some of these days I do think are more important than others. If I was going to put money on it, I would say the first day, the 7th day, and the 13th day are like the peak times that people should watch. I try to focus on just kind of the Trisana, like for my astrological reports, the Trisana and going off unless I see something very, very something that sticks out. So like was it yesterday? Yeah, the eclipse that happened. It happened on the 7th the 7th day sign. So like that's pretty important. So that had to do with the day of Kaban. So the day of Kaban, 7 Kaban, uh, it has to do with a lot of things about the intellect, but it also has to do with borders. It has to do with sovereign nations. And the fact that a solar eclipse was happening on it could mean a dissolution of physical borders, so like just border problems. And obviously we have border problems going on right now in the U.S., but even Great Britain has problems. Really, all of Europe has been having border problems since the Syrian Civil War, but
Yeah.
it's kind of hitting a fever pitch, especially in Great Britain. Um, Obviously, the U.S., but the one thing I was kind of zeroing in on more so in my astrology report, because Kaban not just has to do with earth and earthquakes on the physical realm, it's primarily talking about the mental realm. Kaban is actually kind of like there's a theory that's the drawing of like a brain that's split open like surgically and looking at the synapses. So this has to do with things that aren't really physical. So things in
Hmm.
cyberspace is what I'm getting at. My prediction is that um eh, based upon Kaban, the solar eclipse, the number 7, where current events were going, people placing especially financial assets into something as flimsy as like AI investing, because it's like the new thing to start investing in. Even I would even extend it to crypto, but crypto has kind of like disappointed a lot of people.
Mm.
Really, it's a lot of these AI investings. Uh, they're not real. In fact, like won't spend too much time on it, but like this past week, Elon Musk was no longer the richest man in the world for like a day or two. It was
Mm.
Larry Ellison, the head of Oracle, and then Elon recaptured the richest man in the world moniker by buying stocks of his own company for less than the amounts that made Ellison the richer. So how did he become rich? Basically, at that level, money isn't real. So like it
Yeah.
has to do with like these imaginary things um to claim assets that aren't real. And what happens is that when you are building things on stuff that isn't real, at some point when you need real to pay off, it doesn't pay off, and that's where you have like a market collapse or something. I'm not saying that there's a market collapse. I'm saying the fact that this is even in the news is a manifestation of Kaban and the eclipse. I think we're going to see more of it because, uh, like OpenAI, who had partnered with Oracle, is losing money by the day, even with paid subscriptions to Chat GPT and stuff like that. They're
Oh
banking on
yeah.
stuff that isn't there. So, if all of these AI is getting the biggest investment out of anything in the world right now, technology wise, but it's getting invested with money that isn't real on promises that may not be filled.
Hmm.
So that's what is bringing, I think this eclipse is going to bring to light more. It's just like how much trust are we putting in these things that can zigzag any which way at the drop of a hat.
Yeah.
So you can see that's a very big issue that's going on right now. It's literally involving the most powerful people in the world, and Mayan astrology can point to these things and elaborate
Well, and
on
it's
these things.
interesting too because they unveiled that horrendous golden statue of Trump holding up a crypto coin,
Oh yeah,
like, as a way of, I guess, uh, you can read this a number of ways, but trying to manifest a physical reality to something that isn't has no real material basis.
yeah,
Uh,
and it gets so like there's theories right about like centralization of monetary stuff, right? With that, because here's the thing, like Bitcoin was working and things like that, and I'm not no crypto expert. I've worked with some people that were contractors in that field. But everything that I can understand about it right now, again, I'm no expert, but like it worked, but it was working in isolated cases. And I think there's going to be repercussions for like when you try to force it as a global system or like even a national system of currency, you
mhm.
know, it becomes very problematic, let's just say. And for as quickly as it can be uploaded to a screen, it could probably cause problems even quicker than that because it's all digital. So
Yeah.
Kaban has to do with a lot of these things, these ideas of like the relation between the air, the intellectual air, and the actual physical boundaries, and not in a not necessarily in a pretty way. Actually, 2012 had a lot to do with Kaban too. Had to do with essentially like the fall of the West, but like so like the dissolution of boundaries, the dissolution of
Mhm.
borders. So so there we go. You know, Mayan astrology can predict societal trends. Obviously on an astrological individual basis, it can help you live attuned to cosmic rhythms. And for the magicians out there, and I do consider myself that, I guess I would call myself a Mesoamerican occultist more than anything else, but that is by, it's a magician. So like
Yeah.
basically with Mayan astrology, we can conduct magic with an astrological timing system that is independent of Western timing, i.e., what chaos magic likes to call paradigm jumping. This would actually be a very, I don't know how, for all the critics of chaos magic, right? Of like, oh, you can't paradigm jump and stuff like I believe that for a large portion of how you can go from non-deistic to a deistic kind of frame of mind for the world. That is much harder to do than this. Like this, I think, is a very good example of something like paradigm jumping because the systems work differently. They're using different sources. So if something in the stars is not benefiting you, then maybe something in the mythos of a land is benefiting you. You just
Mhm.
have to switch to that. So another thing is that, for example, I've done magic when the moon is void of course using this. You're typically told not to do magic during moon void of course. Well, because the day sign, the lunation, the number is based upon the moon, but the day sign isn't. I don't have to, essentially I could just turn my astrological timing system purely to the day sign and have it completely terrestrial based and kind of excluding the moon. I'm not saying that it's like a middle finger to the moon or anything because it was void of
Mhm.
course, but it's like, if I need something to happen or I need clarity or I need some better picture or something, I can jump straight to that correspondence. Because and the other thing about the day sense, as I mentioned, it is the living spirit of the day. It has dominion over this next I guess you could say 24-hour period, but it is from sunrise to the next sunrise.
Mhm.
Um, and that is powerful. That is very immediate and it's very accessible. You just gotta know how to, like, get involved in it. But, like, these kinds of spirits, if you will, they're very accessible and very like, this isn't like something like a Goetia or something where you have to have all these procedures. It's not even something like where you have to be, oh, I don't know, there's just many beneficial forces that require a lot of protocol. And while there is, like, some protocol, I will tell you that I think, like, the protocol that I provide is very minimal, but it works because these things are so immediate to us. You know what I'm
Mhm.
saying? Um, so yeah, like Mayan astrology helps with the clarity, as I said, in uncertain times and with personal empowerment, provides a lot of the same benefits Western astrology does, but a different system. That is, when one system isn't working, you can go to the next system. That's a great thing about being in a globalized society with magic. So I do want to mention additional factors that I do consider in Mayan astrology that these are not necessarily maintained, or some of them are not maintained the same way in the daykeeper tradition. And that might be for the sake of tradition. It may be because of a lack of knowledge. There have been anthropological investigations on certain primary resources, and there have been archaeological discoveries made that like the daykeeper tradition, for example, is not privy to because they just don't frequent circles like that. Uh, so some of the additional factors are like traditional lunar phases. These are like an objective thing, right? Because the full moon becomes the full moon. The moon is either waxing or waning. So these are
Mhm.
lunar phases that are your basic magic 101 kind of thing, um, that should be considered and can be an additional factor within working Mayan astrology, at least for thaumaturgic purposes, for spell casting purposes. Maybe not
Yep.
necessarily divination per se, You could, if you're very particular, but more often than not, it's going to be more thaumaturgy for that. The Hob calendar. The Hob calendar is a bit different, like, and that we're talking about difference in spirits. That other Mayan calendar, the way they divide quote unquote months, um, there are cycles of the 20 days that make up 18 months of the year. So they don't have 12 months; they have 18, because there's 20 days of a quote unquote month rather than 30. But those months have spirits as well, and I do consider those in my workings for my astrological reports. I Sometimes there's just so much to cover, I don't have time for those. For
Hmm.
my ritual guides that I will be offering, I will more than likely include the Hob calendar glyphs as well, and those are very unique spirits as well, and they have their own kind of spirit associations, mythological associations that are really cool. Have to do with a lot of primordial Mesoamerican lore. Um, one sec. As I mentioned, planetary considerations. I mentioned retrogrades and stuff like that. But here's the problem with the planets and Mesoamerican thought. I hear this from archaeologists, and I've heard it from indigenous people that kind of picked it up from archaeology, that on this side of the world, Venus was the planet of war. They relate this a lot because of the classic period Star Wars and how Teotihuacan had a cult of war that was based upon Venus. I would say they had a cult of military that was based upon Venus rather than a cult of war, because when you look at it like actually magically, the way that they're engaging with Venus is very different than
Hmm.
how warfare is typically conducted out of survival. Um, I believe that the Maya had a planetary tradition that was very akin to like what Western esotericism calls the seven classical planets. And we have primary resources that are suggesting this. There are artifacts called the vases of the 7 and 11 gods from the classic period, and there are theories from notable archaeologists and anthropologists that this connects to what are known as the books of Chilam Bilam. And the books of Chilam Bilam have a detailed ritual. It's a planetary ritual. It's basically like ascending the seven planets in a quest of apotheosis for
Okay.
this one figure, but it's told as like a mythological tale, but it is very much a ritual. It's literally called the ritual of the colonial translation was the ritual of the angels, but another translation that has been done in the modern day is the ritual of the creatures. So
Hmm.
essentially, the planets were cosmological structures. They were called the infinite precious stones of grace, and they would be numbered. So the first infinite precious stone of grace was the moon. The second was Mercury. The third infinite precious stone of grace was Venus. So they had a system that was very similar to like even Kubala and Western planetary magic. And there's been propositions that this is, oh, it's just purely Western astrology. And I think that theory is just a complete kind of like, let's put a band-aid on it, slap tape on it, and like, oh, it must be
Hmm.
that, let's move on. Because first of all, the correspondences, um, while similar, I think the similarities speak to more of like a universal, like humanity's tapping into these celestial objects that are kind of objective, like in their esoteric
Right.
understandings, because the numerological ideas of them are different. So the biggest one that stands out to me, for instance, is the number of the sun. This number of the sun is 4. It's the fourth infinite precious stone of grace. And anyways, that infinite precious stone of grace, the verbiage is completely different than how it's regarded than like Sephiroth. Yeah, spheres, right? But like planets around in the sky. Like I'm pretty sure ancient people's going to relate them to a round thing. So
Yeah.
the thing is that with the number 4, in the classic hieroglyphic language, the number 4 was directly associated with the sun god. So this is a Mesoamerican correspondences, where if you look at the majority of Western, not all, but the majority of Western planetary correspondences for the sun, you get 6. 6 is the number of the sun typically. So here we have meso numbers being placed upon this planetary system. That is a system of magic that I work. The Belizean Yucatec Maya also turn to the books of Chilam Bilam for rituals and their own forms of practice. So I do consider the 7 planets and their correspondences within my astrological reports as well, not just the retrogrades, because the Maya did have a planetary system. I actually believe that that's where my family more than likely gets some of its ancient traditions from, but a lot of it's lost to time. So I'm not saying like I come from a lineage of Brujas, no doubt. I come from a lineage of witches that were doing magic to get by in life. But I think they probably came from areas of southern Mexico and Guatemala from the classic period that practice like that vase of the 7 gods. I have a feeling that's why, because of like how my family practices and the magic that did survive was very planetary based. And I was always wondering, like, well, where the hell did this come from? I couldn't find it for the longest time until I started looking at more archaeological documents. And I was like, oh, well, this is very interesting because it also has to do with there's like fun fact lineage glyphs and Game of Thrones style stuff from the ancient past that I could bring up. But
Yeah.
planetary correspondences as well. The other things too that have survived are what are called the Lords of Night. So what the Lords of Night are, as the day signs kind of progress, today is 8 Etsnab, tomorrow will be 9 Kawok, and then there will be Tanahau. It will keep progressing in those numbers. There's various other forms of glyphs that are progressing as well. So there's some glyphs that are like 52 years long. So that one ain't changing for a while, right? But
Yeah.
there's the Lords of Night that change every 9 days. So what are the Lords of Night? So in Mesoamerican lore, said there are 9 levels of the underworld. So these Lords of Night essentially represent those 9 levels. Now, these kind of like 9 levels of the underworld, depending on the mythos, like if I read the Popol Vuh to you, Xibalba, the underworld, is like a main stage in that mythos. However, there's not 9 lords of Xibalba described in the Popol Vuh. There's actually like 12 because they come in pairs. So you're not going to end up with an odd number of lords. But as far as the astrology goes, there are these 9 lords that reflect the actual 9 realms. Now, the Lords of Night, we have the Maya glyphs, but they, as far as I know, and I've been digging, I've been trying to stay updated on translations for them. They have not been properly translated, but we do have the glyphs of what these Lords of Night are. What we do have the correspondences to are the Mexica traditions, the Aztecs. So the Nahua have their Lords of Night decoded. So some of these Lords of Night have very clear Maya to Aztec correspondences, like Mictlantecutli very much is Kizin, and Tlaceteot is very much Ishquina. So some of them, like I know who they are, but what the Lords of Night represent are your deepest and darkest desires, essentially. It has to do with, I think, very Jungian shadow stuff. So,
Okay.
that can also be discerned in Mayan astrology. I don't put that unless I have a reason to put that into my astrological reports. I think it would have to be like, what was the Laura Nights? Man, maybe I should have done that for the eclipse, but because that probably would have been a good idea. Come to think about it, well, maybe I'll write a follow-up article on that of like, oh yeah, by the way, the Laura Night on that eclipse was this. That'd be interesting. But
Yeah, that would be interesting.
yeah, there's it's typically better on like an individual basis. You know what I'm saying? Like an individual person's chart because they're talking about deepest darkest desires. But there was if there's a lot of collective like events happening and there's people involved, I could see a reason for like kind of putting that in an astrological report. But on an individual basis, it is very, very useful really helps you understand yourself. When I found out my Lord of Night, it really made a lot of sense for essentially my life going on right now and like what I am prioritizing, for better or for worse. Like it will make you
Hmm.
look at like what is not necessarily the prettiest. Again, it's the underworld. So, also the Venus phase, it comes into consideration. The reason is Venus. I like to say everybody says that the Maya had such a regard for Venus and how Venus was important, like this and that and stuff like that. It was. However, the way it's regarded in Mesoamerica is kind of like a second moon almost. So like
Hmm.
whereas the moon has waning phases and waxing phases that need to be abided by, Venus essentially was regarded in a similar manner to those phases, through its four phases: inferior conjunction, superior conjunction, morning star, evening star. Um, so lots of societal events were planned around the Venus thing. So, like when they're talking about cult of war, Teotihuacan, and people going to war at specific times, they're typically going off of the phase of Venus there. However, I will say that when it comes to those wars and stuff, um, it wasn't just Venus that they were going off of. I think there is a lot of evidence. Well, I don't want to say a lot of evidence, but I think there's emerging evidence for Mars
Hmm.
being considered that. Um, that's a little inside baseball. It's a
Yeah.
little so, but
But we do
maybe
have
another time.
Venus being pretty prominent at the moment as well. Um,
Mm,
like I saw it the other morning when I got up and went outside.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
always charioting the sun.
Yeah.
So, and she will be important for the time to come. So, a lot of Mesoamerican, depending on the myth, right? I mean, really, it depends on how you're approaching Venus. So, was there a proper deity of Venus? I believe in the like the Vase of the Seven Gods tradition, yes. However, Maya city states, they were not a centralized empire like the Aztecs. They were different city states, kind of like Greece, rather than Rome. So when you think Aztecs, think more kind of like Rome structure. When you think the Maya, think more kind of like ancient Greece structure.
Hmm.
Um, so they prioritized different systems of mythos and magic and different legends and stuff like that. There was a lot of cross pollination. There was a lot of points of convergence between them, but uh, they regarded it differently depending on the poetry. So, like Venus was regarded to be ruled depending on the phase by everything from life gods and love goddesses to death gods, straight up. And then it's typically associated with the feather plume serpent in like the post classic period, where Kukulkan or Quetzalcoatl was like pulling the sun out of the underworld because it's like the first thing you see in the sky before the sun comes up. So
Hmm.
Venus was like like the forebearer for the sun, like to let everyone know the sun's coming up.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, but yes, I am launching this new tier to my Substack so that I can better educate and provide value for anybody who's into the esoteric and into astrology, specifically Maya, or if you've never heard about it, I'm trying to give you a practical stepping stone to get involved with it and use it for self exploration and making changes in your life. So, I understand that there's a lot of systemization here and whatnot. So I'll be offering a master class in early November and opening up that tier for people. And we'll cover a lot of the information that we covered here, but like more in depth. And there's new information there, and I'll have graphics and stuff like that to help you better understand. And then for subscribers to that tier, we can hit the ground running because I'll provide monthly ritual and astrological guides and reports.
Yeah.
My astrological reports right now are free. I'm putting them out for free right now. But the ritual guides, so that somebody who's brand new can start doing Mayan magic and do it in healthy dosages. Like, I mean, like consistent dosages. Because, like, say you're Wiccan or say you're a ceremonial magician,
Hmm.
you can most certainly do this, but it's like you have your own practice, right? Um, some people aren't ready to make like a huge commitment or like be like, oh, I don't want to have to relearn everything, but I do want to get involved. This is a good segue to get into doing this. Is these ritual reports I'm giving out for my paid subscribers. On top of that, though, I would like to have a monthly Diviner Circle live stream where I do use select tarot decks because not all, while tarot is a archetypical system and
Hmm.
applies very broadly to the human psyche and a lot of think Joseph Campbell's kind of collective unconscious and Jungian's collective unconscious that I do believe is real. Uh, Tarot itself was based off of a lot of things in Western esotericism. So I've
Yeah.
seen a lot of tarot decks that come from essentially the theme is of a different culture, and they're trying to squeeze in that 78 card system where it doesn't necessarily make sense with some of the
Hmm.
correspondences. So there are two decks that I like to go to that I do feel do it right. Um, and I will be using Mesoamerican style spreads though for those divinations based off of directional correspondences and time-based correspondences and numerology, Mesoamerican numerology correspondences. So I was very much inspired by here in Cleveland. We have the Cleveland Diviner Circle or the Emerald City Diviner Circle at the Buckland Museum of Witchcraft.
Yeah.
And those are such good times, but sometimes I'm not able to make it. And I just thought it would be a great way to like get everybody together and do some divination, at least providing like my take in it, a Mesoamerican take on it, and building a community off of that.
So these are intended to be live videos that you're doing, like live
Yeah,
interactive.
yeah. The
Yeah.
divinations will be live on my Substack.
Okay.
They have a live stream feature native to the platform.
Yeah. 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 So that'll be great. Yeah, people can just tune in, and it will be like interactive, where
Yeah, there'll be a
I
live chat, and then if
yeah,
anybody wants to like get in the zone and start doing divination themselves, like in cohesion.
right.
That's the plan.
Yeah. Yeah. I imagine it could get a little unwieldy if you're trying to reply to a live chat while divining, doing
Yeah,
both at the same time. You
I'm
might need
going.
like an assistant.
Yeah, no, I'm gonna have a mod. I was talking to a friend today. Maybe there'll
Okay.
be a mod. So
Yeah. Yeah, I think it might be necessary. But yeah, this all sounds fascinating. I intend to subscribe. Looking forward to checking it all out when it launches early November, you say. But
yeah,
as I said at the top, I mean your Substack is going. You got the reports that are up there now, and they're fascinating. So
yeah. I'm also providing. I am an occult practitioner of over 20 years now. I was born and raised in a witchcraft tradition. I've cross trained multiple stuff, so I write on all things esoterica as well. I got a lot of articles on practical magic and stuff like that too. So if you're into that, I've gotten great feedback on that as
yeah,
well. I on the side of Substack though, I do offer private readings. Um, the tarot directional correspondences, numerology, divination, and full Mayan astrology chart readings as well. Um, so I guess I'll send you the link to that as well.
right.
Um,
Yeah, and I
but
can absolutely make sure it's in the show notes here. And I do encourage listeners to go check it out, especially if you're already on Substack. You have no excuse. Go subscribe.
I
uh,
appreciate the vote of confidence.
yeah. Well, I mean, I feel bad because I'm on Substack and I subscribe to a lot of people, and I never use it for. I don't post on it at all, and I'm like trying to. I kind of got like one foot in, and maybe using it more, but
Yeah,
I just
yeah,
haven't
it's
really figured it
still
out yet. Yeah.
yeah, it's still a frontier. It's like one of these like a fresher place to be in the
Yeah.
cyberspace
Right.
platform world. So
Right.
uh, yeah, I'm liking it, and I think it provides. There's a couple of esoteric authors on there that I think are worth looking at. Um, I've
Yeah.
seen some good discussions happening there. So I'm hopeful for that platform. I am. I know that a lot of these platforms, like, are very, dissuading for a lot of people in our esoteric communities, but,
Yeah.
I
I mean, there's just
I
too many of them too. It's like dividing your time between a bunch of different platforms.
yeah,
It's exhausting. Um,
yeah.
but I feel like I was really into Substack for a little while just as a place to go read stuff that people wrote, and then they changed the whole format and algorithm of it, and it really threw me off.
Yeah, like, I understand. So, I know they've gotten flack for, like, adding video and stuff like that. Here's the thing though, of, like, why, like, a lot of people are like, "Oh, they just wanna get, like, other influencers on the platform," and they are certainly making an effort for that. There's signs that they've actually, like, paid influencers to come and be a part of it, like a Justin Welsh or something like that. Like, they've no proof here, but there's just a lot of, like, inklings that they may have done that. Like, they may have been like, "Oh, open up a pay tier and we won't charge you the 10%. We'll charge you like 7 or like 3%," or something
Mhm.
like that. That's the theory that's going around, because there's a lot of people there's a fair amount of people doing that. However, the other reason I will sympathize them for the video thing is 2. First of all, it's just like kind of the lingua franca of communications these days, where
Yeah.
just so many people are doing it. I understand, and you're running a business, and you got venture capital backing you.
Mhm.
But also, they are the constriction on media, right? In mainstream media, and people getting fired from mainstream media, getting media passes that they're getting media passes revoked, and then actual influencers are getting, like, proper media passes to the White House and stuff like that to
Yeah.
replace, like, investigative journalists. Some of these investigative journalists, like, their modality is not just writing, it is video. So, like, they're trying to make room for media correspondences that have been ousted or are being silenced, and that I can appreciate that. And if they don't offer video, then they are essentially, like, they're cutting a limb off of, like, what a lot of these independent media people can do.
Yeah.
So, people were mad about the short form, making an appearance, and long form video and live streams. I think it's actually good for like, the more reporting types of Substacks, and it offers me, uh like, I haven't been a YouTuber. I've never been posting reels much, but I've been getting used to it. I do like that I can attach a short form video, a bit more of like a reel, kinda like a teaser trailer towards the beginning of my article, and then I can, get into the writing portions.
Mhm.
I find that enjoyable, and I think it does enhance the newsletter experience.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I wasn't necessarily criticizing. For me, it was just as
Oh,
far
yeah.
as
I'm
people
not
that I
saying you.
was following suddenly disappeared, and I had to go figure out how to get it back the way it was so that I could read the people that I liked reading.
Yeah, yeah, no,
but
no, it
but
has
uh but yeah, to your point, I mean, we're always in flux with all these platforms and stuff. I mean, I, for the longest time, the only one I used was Twitter, and
yeah, and then
I got the hell
that
out of
one
there.
that
Um,
one.
and the last couple of years has been, well, really, it's the last year I've just been completely off of it. So I've felt like a man without a country. Um, but
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, it's all about adjusting and compromising and uh, uh, adapting to the media landscape, and Substack does seem to accommodate a variety of things. If you want to just write, you can just write, but it's nice to be able to have the option to really mix it up and do kind of a mixed media presentation.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and use graphics designs. My eventual goal for my Substack is to essentially have an annual physical magazine based off of, it's called the Mystery Codex, by the way, like, I've been mentioning it. You could
Yeah.
just go to solomonpakal.com. It's on that Substack, it's just like I have a domain on it. Solomonpakal.com will take you to the Mystery Codex, which is my Substack.
Okay.
Um or you can just go on the Substack app or Substack's website and search Mystery Codex with Solomon Pakal, and that's where it's at. But yeah, no, the dynasties are always changing. At one point it was, the Maya were the dynasties here. Then it was imperialist dynasties, and then it changed to modern nation state dynasties. Now it looks like it's going to be corporate dynasties. I
Yeah.
think that show, Alien Earth, it's the latest, like, off of the Alien franchise. That's essentially what it's in its future. Those are the people that own the world. Are five major corporations, but there will always be something like that. Um, I'm not saying it's a good thing. I'm not. It kind of sounds dystopian, but I'm pretty sure people living under the Habsburgs would have said it was pretty dystopian as well.
Right.
And there were plenty of people. I know that, and I'm indigenous here, but I'm also like an indigenous historian. Like, there was a lot of people that did not like living under the Aztec.
Hmm.
like like that's part of the reason why the Tlaxcalans helped Hernan Cortez out in deposing the Aztecs. The
Yeah.
Aztecs
Yeah.
had a lot of enemies. I'm pretty sure it is a pretty dystopian reality when you know that there's a foreign army that's not just going to come and capture, like, they're not going to just come and ransack your town. They're going to come, they're going to capture you, and they're going to take you to an altar and sacrifice you. That's what the
Right.
Aztecs were doing. I'm not trying to demonize the Aztecs, because there's plenty of fantastic, amazing traditions there, but that's a part of our history. To deny that part of our history is to not be real. Um,
Hmm.
and that sounds like a pretty dystopian reality. I'm pretty sure people living within the borders of Tenochtitlan, the Aztec capital, many of them would have great things to say about
Hmm.
the Aztec Empire. So, these things are always going to be here. I think as an esoteric community, we have to recognize the mystic takeaways of that there's always going to be Saturnian forces. There's always going to be solar forces that inspire hope. The
Hmm.
Saturnian forces run the systems. There will always be a Venus worth fighting for. There
Hmm.
will always be, a generous father figure somewhere, that Jupiterian figure. There will always be messengers, your mercurial figures.
There's always going to
So
be an underworld.
there's always going to be an underworld. There's always going to be an upper world,
Hmm.
and there's always going to be a place in the middle here where there is a compilation of stories, and people have to make choices as characters here. Virtues are going to be tested, resolves are going to be tested. There will be heroes, there will be villains based upon what shapes us here. It's an imperfect world, but it does have some perfect moments at times.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And that perfection is worth aspiring to, I think. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. Well, that's like a wonderful way to end this, I think.
Yeah, yeah, that was
I, don't,
I'm gonna remember that one.
I
That
don't
was
think that we could top that. So we should quit while we're ahead.
yeah, that was smooth. So yeah.
But yeah, listeners, check out the Mystery Codex on Substack or salmonpakal.com. It will bring you there. You'll find the link there. And thank you so much, Solomon, for coming back on the show. Uh, I had planned on having you back, and I'm glad we made it happen because you're a pleasure to talk to and a wealth of knowledge.
Same, man. I always have a blast talking with you. So it was a pleasure
Yeah.
coming back. I'm glad you had me. Thanks.
All right. Thanks.